So let's talk about the layer library. We're doing lots of libraries here. Well, that's not terribly exciting. There's nothing in it. The idea, and this is where we get into a little more direct enforcement of CAD standards, if you will. So the others are just making sure people have access to the right information as far as the various settings and so forth. It's not so much enforcing it, but just saying, here it is, you can go grab it and use it and go on from there. So in this case, I do want to open a different drawing so I have some layers I can pull in. Where'd it go? Let's open up this one. There we go. Some of you may have seen this drawing before. It's one of our tutorial drawings that we ship with the software. So one of the easiest ways to start building your layer library is find one of your drawings that has a bunch of your layers in it, the way you like them, and simply tell it to import the drawing layers. You can create a category for it, which will end up in the panel on the left there. And there's my layers from my drawing. I do find it a little unusual that the first few primary colors we put names in for, but then we start using the numbers rather than using color number 7 for white. And, I don't remember blue and green anymore. It's been too many years. So that's one quick way to start building this. You can also save as, so you can save and share with others. And for a little more robust one here, they're saved out with an LA extension. We can load up the National CAD standards. A little more robust, you can see by the size of my guide over here, there's a whole bunch of layers here. And that's just the survey layers. Then there's all the civil layers and all the general layers. So you can see where having categories and subcategories could be helpful. You can change the order these are in using the up and down arrows. These actually would make something a subcategory, which I don't think we want to do there. You can add new categories, delete categories. If you're like me and you misspell things constantly, you can change the spelling on a category. Fix those errors. Let you know which one you're looking at here. You can add and remove layers. So if I want to just add a specific layer, or if I need to delete a layer, I can do that. I can take a layer that's in the wrong category and move it to the category it belongs in. I can even search for things or filter based on colors and different things like that. So what are the advantages of having this? Well, we can actually compare the drawing to this. And what it's telling me is there's one layer that matches. God knows what layer that is. And there are 26 non-standard layers in my drawing compared to what's in my layers library. So the idea would be to tell people that, hey, as you're working on the projects, this is, if you need a layer, come here and find it. If you don't find it here, come talk to us. Don't just arbitrarily go adding layers. But again, if you want a boundary layer you want added to this, we go into, I think it's create. No, cancel that. Want the boundary layer, you just right click on it and create vBoundary. And now that layer is part of my drawing. And I can actually go ahead and draw stuff on that layer going forward. So it's easy to grab individual layers. You can also dump them all out to a drawing as well. But there's a lot of layers. There's several hundred layers in here. So I don't know that I would necessarily put them all out there to begin with. Let's see. profiles. Yeah, IntelliCAD does have a user profile. A lot of the information from that actually gets pulled forward with the migration manager as well. Before I leave this and look at that, let's talk about extra fields here that you can add. So this might be a place where you could add that field for your symbol name that you want to put in there. All right. So we'll just hit OK there. So under settings down at the bottom, we have the settings migration. And the wizard will actually take you through looking at your older versions and trying to pull things forward from those. And yes, it is going to look at things like your toolbars, where they're located and which ones are turned on and that kind of thing. It's also going to grab any of your user information like annotation settings, FLD files that you've created, bring those forward for you. Although anything in your settings folder should still be there because we all use the same settings folder. At worst, what it would do is, or you may need to do, is map your settings folder to that network location. There's also a toolbar manager that lets you save out toolbar information going forward. And I'm suspecting some of these questions are being driven by the fact, oh my God, Carlson came out with a new version. I'm going to have to do all this work again. We're trying hard to eliminate a lot of that work with things like the migration manager. It tends to be pretty effective in what it does. So that's kind of our layer library. And again, starting to enforce some CAD standards and saying that these are the layers that thou shalt use, and if you don't find them here, let us know. But it does standardize that, and that can be based on your current Office standards, the client standards, or the national CAD standards, whatever you find is most applicable and easiest for your office to work with. So there's a couple other items I wanted to go through. Gosh, and these were the ones that were going to take a lot of time too. And they're not on the settings menu. Well, one of them is. I'm going to go to the draw menu though and play with this one because it's gotten to be a lot more fun. Draw to standard. And when you think about enforcing an Office standard, this is kind of like the tool. So if you need to draw something, you're going to come in here and say, I want to draw a standard item. I want to draw a building. And it's an existing building. So I'm going to draw that item. And there's my building. Down at the command line, it's saying, hey, do you want to draw another building? Well, no, actually, I just got the one. Oh, wait a minute. It has text tied to it. So I can call this building A. And I can bring it in here and actually have it placed at the centroid of the building. And it will let me put in multiple labels, which for a building I don't know is necessary, but if you're doing, say, the center line of a road, you might want to label it multiple times. Or there's another one I was playing with called wetlands that you may want to do multiple times. And there's all kinds of interesting things you can do with these. So we've pre-populated this with a whole bunch of stuff. And if I close this momentarily and click on this guy, you'll see that we've added a layer, vBuilding, which is kind of a National CAD Standards layer for that. The text down here is on a layer called vBuilding text. Again, very much National CAD Standards idea. So when we draw it to standard, all of this information has been preset in here. And yes, there is this little thing called quick keys, which whoever set our default ones up doesn't understand the idea of quick keys the way I understand the idea of quick keys. And we'll look at that because we're going to come down here and talk about What if you don't want to use Carlson's default stuff? We may not have come up with the most perfect way to do things. So you have this standard item. This is where we add stuff to this. You can add your own categories. If you get into a particular item, I'm going to come down here to wetlands. Now I can add an item. If I go to a particular item, I can draw it from here. I can load it. I can edit it. So this is where we have things like where it falls, what category it's under, what its name is. So this is telling me this is an existing wetlands labeled with L80, which we all know is Leroy 80, and everybody understands exactly what Leroy 80 is today. And it's left justified. All right. The line is colored by layer. The text, I went in and actually did an edit on this so that my text is hard-coded. That's what it's going to put in. It's not going to prompt you for text. All right? It's fixed. I can turn this off, and then you'll get a prompt that says, hey, wetlands, or you can change it to something else. Or you can just leave this blank, and it'll come up blank like it did with my building A earlier. You can control things like leaders, masks, in-text, justification, and so on. And then there's this little quick key. I don't consider V-WETL to really be a quick key. If I were going to be doing this all the time, I would probably have something shorter for that. For me, a quick key is 2-3 letters, preferably close together on the keyboard if we can, to make it easier to do. You'll also notice there's this option to add from drawing. So I can actually go pick something in the drawing to add to this. But here is where you'd add text. We could add a symbol to this as well, add the line. And what that does is it just adds a thing in here. We're going to do a line for what I'm doing right now. We'll just leave it nasty like that. We'll give it okay and okay. So now there's another line in here. We'll go ahead and remove that. Don't need it in there. Okay. So you can absolutely build your own. You can actually go into the drawing and grab them out of the drawing to start creating this, select your own fence lines and so forth. But this becomes very much control over how things are being put into your drawing, because you're going to tell us what layer it goes to, what color it's supposed to be. What were some of the other ones? I was playing around with creek earlier. And no, we're not going to draw another creek, but we're going to put a label on it. And again, it wants to snap to the endpoints, and this is a setting I have in mind. But you can kind of set up the rotation. And yeah, there's a certain amount of playing with it to get used to how the rotations work and all that. But hopefully you get the idea of how you can use this to go through and establish your own standards, or use the ones that we've put in here to make things happen. So we'll double check for any questions on this. Questions just keep rolling in. Can you use the National CAD Standards layers to a specific template? Have the user created layer system from a different drawing template? Yes, you can create a template and insert the National CAD Standards layers into it and have that available to use for creating new drawings. You can also have user-created layer systems from a different drawing. Yeah, you can have multiple templates, and as you create a new drawing in Carlson, you'd simply select the template you want to use to create that. In fact, I'm pretty sure we ship a template that has the National CAD Standards layers in it, don't we, Luis?
Yep, we do. So there's the NCS Civil, NCS Survey, and then there's the just NCS with all of those. It only has the Civil and Survey, by the way. It doesn't have all the architectural stuff.
Okay. Can draw to standard, add multiple different labels, building, civic, surface, material. I actually haven't played with that. But if you think about what I was showing earlier with the draw to standard, when we're setting up that standard, let's see here. So we go in and let's take a look at the building line here, for instance. If we edit that, I can add as many lines of text as I want, and I could even do things like edit that text to give it kind of a default. Default here is building name. It's not fixed, which means I can edit it, but what I'm really doing is prompting the user to put in the building name. And then there can be another piece of text that's going to ask for what the surface material is on something, that type of thing. So yes, you can have multiple lines of text associated with this. What I haven't done is played around a lot with how that works. Let's find out. It's always fun to experiment on the fly live with software. Anybody want to guess? So we get building B put in here, and it should come up when I finish with building B with the next label. I'm going to resist. Oh, I need to make some adjustments on my label. So again, we'd come back in and edit this second label. Yeah, the height is a bit much. This typically are 0.08. I think that one's 0.08, isn't it? Yeah. There we go. Got to even put it on the right layer. Yep, it's on the right layer, so we're good. So yes, you can set up and do multiple labels inside those. Okay, you got me on this one, Greg. I can't. I don't know that these are going to be directly applicable in metric. Again, I would have to test it. If I have a drawing that's set to metric, I mean, we've got a scale multiplier of 0.08, which is going to be multiplied times the metric scale. It may work just fine. I would actually have to test it. That's one that I can't give you absolute answer to.
Yeah, but even then, when I saw the question, I was thinking sometimes those, the values that we use here in the U.S. National CAD standards, they don't literally translate apples to metric. So you start thinking about like 1 to 100 scale, 1 to 1,000 scale, and the values, they're a little off. I mean, so you might need to do some edits anyway. But yeah, I think that we should probably test it, I guess. But I wouldn't be that confident that the numbers translate just by simple conversion from metric to feet correctly.
Yeah, and what the heck, we can grab some intern this coming summer and just have them build that metric set so it's in the software moving forward.
Yeah.
Can you use the drawing standards with field to finish? this particular function, boy, I'm going to give you a yes, no, maybe kind of answer. There are things in here like control, where there's some symbols being used. You know, open square, open triangle, that kind of stuff. So it's going back and using those symbols that may be applicable for your control defaults, but it's not actually reading from your field to finish file. That said, your field to finish file is again part of the whole CAD standards enforcement, because it's already preset to use the right symbols on the right layers, you know, the correct lines drawn on the right layers with the correct line type. So yeah, the field to finish file doesn't necessarily directly tie to this, but the two should match up nicely. And you may have to manually match those up to make sure you have the same symbols going forward. Can you add hatch to a standard item? Well, it would seem like you ought to be able to. What would I hatch? I'm not going to hatch my control. Have to be, well, let's see, maybe that building we were looking at earlier. There's my building annotation. Let's see what happens if we edit this guy. What symbols can we add? I'm not finding hatch. Yeah. So, okay, that's two things we need to add: a metric version of this and the ability to hatch closed polylines. So hopefully somebody's taking copious notes on this. All right. I got 6 minutes to go through the toughest one of all, so I'm not going to save my changes there. All right, so that's draw to standard, and again, to this point, it's like the most direct. This is how you draw stuff. This is where it goes. This is our office standard or our client standard. This is how things happen here. All right, going back under settings, and I guess the other thing to kind of note is I don't care what modules you have. Everything I've shown you today is on these first 7 menus that everybody gets. So no matter what modules you have this stuff. The last one we're going to take a quick look at here. Project data folders. It's a little thing called Settings Server. Don't know if any of you have ever used it. But basically, it wants to kind of kick up a notch or two what's happening when you move your settings out to a network location or a server location. Apparently, Greg uses the settings server. Good deal, Greg. So you start with the setup, and this is where you're going to tell it, where does my settings server want to live? I've actually used this for what I do on a regular basis before. And what I did is I went to a secondary drive, went to my Carlson Projects folder, and created a settings folder. Why? Well, if I take all the standard Carlson settings, the default ones out of the box, and stick them there, then I can restore those at any time I want after I've been to someone's office and been manipulating different settings to match what they do in their office as we're working through things. Trust me, there are few things that are more embarrassing than going to a different client's office and starting to show them a demo of the software with all of your settings. I'd much rather have a clean slate when I start. All right, so in here, automatically check settings server on startup. Every time you start Carlson, it's going to look at the settings server, and if your settings aren't the same as what's on the settings server, if the dates don't match, it will do something depending on what's selected. Under Manage Settings Server, there's a couple of different options. Use base settings. What this does is say, hey, the first time we're going to copy these over, and it's like there's a flag set that says, hey, we've copied these once, you changed them, you have to tell us if you want to update that. Okay. The second option is use update settings. When that's toggled on, I don't care who you are, when you launch Carlson, it's going to revert you to whatever's on the settings server location. That can be problematic if you've made some changes for a particular client to, say, an annotation style, and you go home that night and the next morning you come back and it puts all those changes back to your corporate default. Now you get to make them all again. So we add files to this. You can add multiple files. We can add things from your settings folder. These are things like your profile layouts, your FLD files, your annotation setups, and there's a whole laundry list of stuff here. What I would encourage you to do is find the ones that you want to control. There's a lot of stuff in there that we don't all use on a regular basis. Don't just dump everything in here, because that's going to give you a long list of stuff that it has to sort through. Your support folder, this is going to be all those little DWG files, all those symbols. Maybe you do want all of those out on your settings server to make sure nobody messes with those. If you do want to take multiple things out there, make sure you check the select multiple files before you go into the folder, and then you can use Control and Shift to select groups of files going forward. Your user folder, these are things that are under C:users, your name, and down the long laundry list, as you're seeing up here, app data, roaming, Carlson software, Carlson 2020. To get to these, there's a lot of INI files in here. I think there is one I want to grab, though. Where did he go? There's one I was going to play around with to kind of show you how this works when it's doing its little checking thing. Yeah, that one. We'll just add that one. And I don't need a comment on it. So this is just my Carlson Quick Keys from my user folder. Okay? I can use the base settings. I can tell it to update this every time I open my file. Okay? We click OK. So I've got the location. Restore backup, what that does is, if I open this and it changes stuff, I can restore backup and it puts my original files back. At least that's the theory. Okay, and we hit OK. And, excuse me. If I go to this other drawing, I want to just double check and make sure settings server is still toggled on, still there, still have that. Okay, so that transcends individual drawings. All right, the reason I want to do that is I'm going to be closing this down and restarting it several times as we go through this, experimenting, and I don't want to try and save drawing one. That's just not where I go. All right. So now I'm going to go into settings and quick keys and add another quick key, because there's never enough quick keys. ZM for Zoom Most. If you have not tried Zoom Most, oh, guys, you really need to try Zoom Most. It's a nice add-on here. All right, so I've added a quick key. So the quick keys in my folder are different than what's in the settings server now. So let's go ahead and close this guy down. I will save what's here and not save what's in drawing one. I didn't like that big brick anyway. And we'll restart 2022. Restarting 2021 wouldn't have the right effect anyway. Oops, we're out of time. I guess we're done.